Many people in the public still have questions about the alleged child pornography case that took place within the Charleston County School District in 2014. In this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I sit down with former Charleston County School Board member Elizabeth Moffly one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Elizabeth Moffly, it's so good to see you again.
Quintin,
How are you?
it's always fun to be here.
I appreciate it greatly. Same here.
Yeah.
I got to talk to you with some developing news. And this is coming from live5news.com, written by Carter Cole, as you know. And we're talking about the obvious. And here's the headline. Charleston County School Board names law firm addresses Gapper's investigation evidence. And obviously, we're talking about the Charleston County School District. And in fact, they actually confirmed that they hired Wilbur Johnson at Young Clement Rivers Law, which is a highly respected law firm in town, to investigate how the district handled former employee Marvin Gevers. And allegedly, he was found with child pornography, allegedly, on his work laptop. How did we get here?
And molestation.
Yes, that's what is being reported.
You know, I was a guardian ad litem. I don't know if you knew that. But I was court appointed to investigate child abuse and neglect. And that was really hard. The things that kids go through, and they seem to get re-victimized once it's investigated as well, sadly. I was on the board when this incident supposedly took place, and of course none of us were aware of it. We had a board policy that the district attorney was to keep us informed, I think monthly, and they would never inform us of anything, the legal allegations against the district. We finally had to sort of set down a strict policy that every 6 months, which I didn't like, but this is what we ended up with, that we would be apprised of all the legal issues that we were facing, and this never came to us.
Who was the district attorney at that time?
His name was John Emerson. And what's interesting about this case is both him and his paralegal checked out the computer to check out the allegations 37 days after it was retrieved from the employee, but they didn't hand it over. I think it was 37 days, it might have been longer, to law enforcement. I don't know what took them so long to do that, but it's something I think the board should have been made aware of, and we were never made aware of. And John Emerson is now with, I think he's with Dorchester District too, interestingly.
What is the IT policy for the Charleston County School District, as you know?
It's pretty much zero tolerance. At that time, I think it was James Wimbush was the head of Dunston Elementary. It was the Opportunity Zone. And he very well could have decided on his own to put Mr. Gathers back in that school, unbeknownst to the superintendent, or they could have done it together, because he did write a letter of apology saying that was on his own time, off work hours. But it wasn't only adult porn, which I'm sure plenty of people watch, I don't, but it also had child pornography.
And Carter Cole wrote this also too. It says this quote, "This comes in response to a Live 5 News investigation into how the Charleston County School District handled an employee named Marvin Gevers. In 2014, IT specialists suspected they found child pornography on Gevers' school laptop, and 37 days later reported it into law enforcement. Why the politics?
Why the delay? That's my question. I mean, I don't have any answers because I was uninformed, sadly. Which goes back to the school board elections. We need board members that are proactive, not that are just accepting of whatever the district tells them and they don't ask questions.
And I also know that she wrote this too. School and police files we obtained showed, Channel 5 obtained, showed that the school district leaders did not terminate him or place Gavros on long-term leave after they reported him to police. I know that he was on administrative leave.
For a week.
For a week. What does that tell you?
They didn't take it seriously. But once you've identified child pornography, that would be like the red light.
And also, it goes on to say this in this particular article, Gabbers continued to work, as you mentioned, at Dunson Elementary in North Charleston until he was arrested for child pornography 22 months later. He was later charged, as you mentioned earlier, with molestation of 2 students, assaults that allegedly happened in that 22-month window. Where are you emotionally with this?
I'm very sad for those children he had complete access to them, and to have them alone. He even drove one of those children from an event in his own car. It's sad, honestly. It makes me sick.
Where is Nancy McGinley in all of this discussion?
That would be interesting. I'm sure she's not going to say anything until somebody approaches her, and then that would be doubtful that she would say anything unless she was required by law to make a testimony.
And I know that there's a lot more questions still lingering, and many people in the public want answers to these questions as well. What more questions do you want in this particular case?
Well, I would like to know who was responsible for the decision to reinstate him after it was identified, and I think that's really the bottom line. Who was responsible?
An outside investigation for this. Why now?
I think it's Carter. She is a really good investigative reporter, and she feels very strongly about child abuse, and she wants answers, and she wants somebody to answer for it. And those people that were responsible are still here. They're still alive, and they're the ones that made the decision to allow this to go on.
Now, just to be, I understand this too, that according to the Charleston County School Board, they're basically saying some of those employees are no longer employed with the district.
That is true.
Okay.
But they're still here. Or somewhere.
Okay. What do you want from them? What answers do you want from them right now?
I think the people that are responsible for placing them back in the school are the ones responsible for the continued abuse. And I think they need to answer to that.
Now, going forward, as far as policies, what should the Charleston County School Board change in your mind when it comes to protecting kids?
Well, I think the legislative delegation is looking at this as well, to have a stricter state law on zero tolerance, that is termination or a long-term administrative leave. And maybe it's without pay, and I think that's the biggest thing. When we do administrative leaves for the Charleston County, we tend to continue to pay these people. You know, we had that with teachers that stayed on the payroll, even though they've been terminated. They kept getting paychecks a couple of years ago. But I think when you're put on leave for something of this nature, I don't think it should be with pay, unless you're proven to be innocent, and then you can receive back pay.
Let me go back to 2014. In your mind, who was running this district? Was it the school board or the school district in your mind?
No, the administration runs this district. The school board is uninvolved. I sat on it for 4 years.
Right.
It was very frustrating, emotionally and physically. It was draining to get answers because they don't communicate, sadly. And they got away with this behavior because the superintendent had 5 board members that always voted in the affirmative with her. And so as long as you have the vote, you win, and the rest are left out.
And for those people who don't know, who were those 5 board members in your mind?
Gosh, you make me think this for you. It's been a while.
It's Quintin's close up.
You're right. Well, it wasn't me.
Right.
I was always on the losing end of that vote, but it was, at one time, it was Craig Askew, Chris Frazier, Cindy Coates, I'm trying to remember who was on the board. Toya Green was one of them, Ann Opplinger was another. Nancy had a firm grip on 5 votes. And no matter whether, at one board meeting, I remember, they were breaking federal law, and the board voted not to do anything about it, to let it continue. And my question was, how does a school board have the authority to overturn laws? Which they've done in this very case as well. The procurement code was something I read very thoroughly, and there are board exemptions that are given to us by the state. At the time, it was the state budget control. I think they've now changed the name to the accountability, accountability, I don't know, they've changed the name. But our procurement code has to be approved by the state, and once it is approved, and the board has to approve it, and once it's approved, it becomes state law. And in this case, for outside legal counsel, it is required that the board approve outside legal counsel. And I'm not sure how the district went about hiring. I know they hired legal counsel before the board approved any. So it right there that's a violation of state law.
As a matter of fact, board member Kevin Hollished says he isn't satisfied with the firm picked for the district's investigation. He says this, quote, "I'm not happy with the investigation pathway." He said this also, quote, "We're using a cookie cutter firm we normally use in this district. No consideration talking to board members, especially those that live in that district."
Well, you know, we're all elected at large, which I disagree with. I think we should be elected by our district. That's something I would like to see changed. But, you know, it's like county council. County council is elected by district, but they serve at large for Charleston County. And I think the school board needs to be elected in the same manner. But there was no input from the board. There was no discussion. They were hired prior to the board making a decision, so it was never brought to the board, which is the board's oversight to decide who's going to be outside legal counsel. And it sounds to me, the decision that the superintendent made, that the rest of the board members just turned over and played dead.
And he says cookie cutter firm. What type of firm should they be using in your mind?
I mean, I know that firm is very reputable. You know, it's a big firm. They have their hands in a little bit of everything. Why not? It's big money. But, you know, there was no discussion, and I'm sure Kevin is upset because there was no discussion. It wasn't brought to the board for discussion of ideas of who they should be looking at. And the board didn't make this decision. The superintendent made it on her own.
And you talk a lot about school board elections and how the school board should be organized. Let me turn you to the November elections. Obviously, there's a couple of seats up for grabs in the East Cooper, North Charleston, and West Ashley area. And I understand that you may be leaning sooner or later towards Paul.
Oh, I know definitely who I'm voting for in November. For East of the Cooper, there are 4 people running. Kate Darby's running as an incumbent, and I would not vote for any incumbent that's coming in. They are, unfortunately, what happens with a lot of people, they forget who elects them. They forget that they're elected by their constituents, the taxpayer, and that's who they're there to represent. They're not there to protect the administration. They don't work for the administration, but too often, it's just easier to give up all authority and just go with whatever the administration says and not be an active participant as a board member. So in November, East of the Cooper, I'm Sarah Shea Johnson, who is now the constituent chairman of District 2. She's one of my votes.
Okay.
Jake Rambo, who used to be the principal at one of the East Cooper elementary schools, I can't remember which one it was, James B. Edwards, I think.
Okay.
I think he has a lot of good insight, having been a principal, of how the administration works and what it's not doing inside the schools. I think he would be a great representative. West Ashley, how many people are running over there?
So many.
I know, right? But I always liked Paul Petrone.
Okay.
When I was on the school board, he's very honest, straightforward. He has a lot of, you know, administrative insight. And so I think he would be very helpful on the board. And then the lady out of North Charleston who is running against Cindy Coates.
Right.
Cindy's been there 8 years. It's time for her to give it up. Vivian Pettigrew.
Right, I just interviewed her.
She's a very nice lady. She's very smart. She was a teacher.
Right.
And I think those people would be very influential in decisions that are made on the board. And at the same time, I think they would work very well with the existing board members, being Chris Collins and Kevin Hollenshed. I think that would give us, the constituents, a better representation of what needs to be happening and which direction this district needs to be going in.
What does that representation look like now on the school board in your mind?
Right now, it's everyone has, not everybody, but she has 5 and usually 6 that just acquiesce to whatever the superintendent decides, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Let's go back to the protests that we had.
Right.
Was that May 2017? The map testing, the superintendent decided that she wanted to use map testing, which is supposed to be a diagnostic tool for teachers to be able to address where a student is and what level of help they need. Well, she decided that she would submit a new teacher evaluation that she made up to the state without any input from anybody in the district. We have, 3,500 teachers who are going to be affected by this, and I don't know, 81, well, we have more than 81 principals. We have 81 principals, but then we have a huge amount of assistant principals. Like East Cooper, Wanda, we have, I think, 15, if not 16 assistant principals over there. That school is just huge. But that they were going to use map testing for the teacher evaluation, which was going to directly affect, so let's say I have a student with a learning disability, and that student is not performing, it's going to, you're actually setting a conflict between the students and the teachers, and I think that is absolutely unfair and should never happen. And a lot of teachers got caught in this. Even Teachers of the Year got caught in this evaluation that was just sprung on them with no advance notice. And even the map company has said, their evaluation, their tests for students was never to be used in this manner, and which was why we had that huge protest. And Kate Darby was one of the first to champion the superintendent and say, that she was going to answer and, don't worry about it and get over yourself, basically.
Oh, and I want to get to Burke High School. I forgot all about that, but obviously the Pepper Law Firm is basically suing the Charleston County School District over a former teacher who allegedly had sexual relations with a student, and she doctored his grades after sexual advances weren't given. What is going on in the Charleston County School District?
Well, I don't think it's just Charleston County. I think it's happening countrywide. Well, it's happening throughout the world. Just look at the Catholics, but when you put your trust in someone to deal with students, you have to. There has to be a line, the line in the sand. You don't cross that line with your students. And sadly, some people they do.
Elizabeth Moffly, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Well, thank you, Quintin, and hello, everybody else.
In TV land, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.